Welcome to Chapter 2. We've made it past all the intro topics, so let's dive into getting Python and PySWM installed in your computer. The purpose of this chapter is to help those along who have little to no familiarity with Python. However, this is not a guide to becoming a Python programmer or a tutorial on Python. There's several other opportunities and spaces to learn how to do that online. This will cover getting the PySWM set up on your computer, as well as in this particular lesson, we're going to talk about the documentation so that you will know where to find things when you start pushing out of the basics of PySWM. So let's get started. Okay, here we are. What we've done is we've gone to PySWM documentation, Google that, and we look at the first menu item there. And so this brings you to kind of a landing page on the project with the table of contents. We've got an overview, download authors, installing, tutorial section, and reference section. The main focus of what we're going to talk about in this today is the tutorial section and the reference section. The rest have been covered in the intro and welcome video, and as far as the installing processes, those are the videos to follow in this chapter. So let's go ahead and go to the tutorial. And the first thing we look at is we go to loading a model. This brings you through the various ways to load a model and execute a simulation. For example, the first one we call the execute a method in the simulation object, and that will run your simulation, does not allow you to interact with it. The other and preferred way to run a simulation is using what's called the context manager with context manager. We have a section on nodes and creating node objects and links and subcatchments, and then we have a whole intro on the controls and how you would develop more sophisticated controls, on generating and injecting flow inside of a running simulation, and finally accessing the binary output file after the simulation is complete. We also have sections on LID controls, groups, and units and things like that. So they're spelled out very clearly in these subsections of how to do it. And as we go through the video series with chapters 3 and chapters 4, it'll become very, very clear and obvious how to start using these, instantiating link objects, node objects, and interacting with them. As you get further along and go beyond the tutorial, you may be wondering, what else can I do outside of what's being presented during this tutorial series? So let's pop into the reference section. So for starters, when you, for example, instantiate a simulation handle, create an instance of a simulation. Yeah, these are the basics of running a model, but there's these other additional things you can do with the simulation handle. And we'll talk in more detail, but things like getting the current simulation time, finding the end time, adjusting the start and end time, getting the engine version, getting the error units, getting the flow units, setting initial conditions, getting the present complete, and various things. They're very useful to know, particularly the step advance. We'll talk about this in more detail, but this is essentially the step at which you are choosing to interact with the running simulation. And we'll talk about parts of this that are critical to know and also things that probably are not as useful. In the nodes section, we're very familiar with things like depth and flooding rates and full depth, but we'll go through and talk about the generated inflow function, meaning while the simulation is running, we can inject this flow rate. We pick a flow rate to inject it into that node. Looking at depths and invert elevation information, we have all the parameter information. We can check the type. We can look at the lateral inflows and all kinds of various things we can do. And let's go to the links. Scroll through that for just a moment. We can grab all kinds of link data. We can look at its connections. We can look at the setting of a link. So current setting and target setting, those are related to the controls. Extract the flow, set a flow limit. Oh, there's just 1,010,000 things we can do here. Plenty of options to keep you interested, but all these things are available in the reference section and nowhere else. So if you want to find the information out and get more interesting pieces of things out of a running model, this is where you come.